Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the AG Lounge by Airline Geeks podcast. My name is John McDermott. I am here, as always, with my co-host, Danny Gibertini.
Hello, everyone.
We are also joined today by Pablo Diaz, who is one of our staff writers at Airline Geeks. Pablo, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, everyone.
Pablo, we've invited you today to discuss an article that you wrote yesterday about an update that Boeing has released about its production rates in the 747. So we know that Boeing is cutting production on a number of its aircraft to kind of compensate for the drop in demand with the coronavirus. And I'd love if you could just give us a general overview to get the conversation started.
Yeah, it was expected in a way. The thing is that it was a big rumor going around in the last week about the cut for the production rate of the 777X, but the cuts were extended to most of the products. I mean, the only two products that are not going to have the production rate reviewed or revised are the 747 and the 767. Basically, because there are no orders for those. Just there are some freighters orders for the 767, and in fact, this is marking the end of the 747 production in 2022.
Yeah.
Another thing that happened is that the 737 Max production rate is not going to ramp up as they expected. So the recovery is going to be slow for the main product that Boeing has now and is going to have for the next 10 years.
Yeah, so to give some numbers as we're moving on, Boeing is cutting production on its 787 Dreamliners, on the 777, and on the 737. Most notably, as you mentioned, the 737 Max. So it's taking Dreamliner production down from 10 to 6. 777 production is going from 5 to 2. And then 737 Max, as you mentioned, I think is going to about 30 to 31 by 2022. Which is a bit of a slower return than expected.
Yeah, it is strange because just 2 years ago, the factory was frantic about going to 57 aircraft delivered per month, and now it's going to de-escalate that to 31 per month, anticipating that what is a trend now. I mean, the industry has stalled, so the recovery is going to take a few years. I mean, most analysts are thinking about 4 or 5 years, to say the least. So the eager for the product is not that big now, so they are going to have to adjust the backlog to a much a better sense rate, and that is at this moment 31 per month.
I think another key aspect, especially if we're looking at the Max and the 777X, is the certification of the two aircraft. So, of course, I think everyone that knows much about aviation at all will have some idea of what's going on with the 737 Max recertification. So the FAA ran some tests earlier this month to start analyzing data from the aircraft based on some fixes that Boeing has made. And production, I think, is going to stay low a lot because of the process that it'll take to get the Max back to service. So, of course, it's going to be kind of bad business for them to be making too many of those if they can't deliver any. So that's, of course, playing a role in this.
And the thing is that even though if Boeing has the aircraft certified now, that is something that Boeing expects because it changes the equation. I mean, if you're not going to be able to deliver an aircraft because it is not certified, the blame is on you. But if you're not receiving the aircraft once it is certified, the blame is on the operator. So the fees and the penalties are going to exchange sides. So for Boeing, it's critical to recertify the 737 MAX as soon as possible, but the operators are not as keen to receive those. So if you're going to push them with the aircraft, you're going to see delays, cancellations, and that is at this moment is really bad for business at this time. So what is expected now is for the aircraft to be complete this recertification process by end of this year. Today, William Calhoun on the meeting said that the expectation is for this to be finalized in the fourth quarter. So I think 2021 is going to be the year that we see the 737 MAX flying commercially again. But the adaptation or in the introduction of the model is going to be much slower than we expected and anticipated before. Even though it's an aircraft that has almost 4,000 orders, so at that production rate, at that pace of delivery, we are going to see steady deliveries for 737 MAX for at least 10 years.
Yeah, and I think also playing into that, as we're following the MAX recertification, is also the 777X certification, which has been delayed by a few years, in part because of the MAX. But we're also seeing reductions in 777 production. I think in large part because of that, but I don't know, maybe there are some other reasons why 777 production might be cut. For example, like reduced demands or reduced need for big wide body long haul aircraft. But the two aircraft in many ways kind of seem linked to me, because the focus that Boeing needs to put on the MAX is affecting the focus it can put on the 777X.
Yeah, absolutely. And the 777X is suffering basically from demand, and the pressure to gain more clarity on the recertification process for the 737 MAX is going to add pressure on the 777X certification. I mean, the stakes are high. One thing that we cannot be sure is that the 737 MAX is going to be one of the most scrutinized aircraft in the world. I mean, it is going to have several revisions, much more than any other aircraft in this point of history. So the pressure for a recertification process or a certification process for the 777X to be transparent and to address several topics that the MAX certification process didn't take into account is going to be big, and that is one of the things that is pushing the date to 2022 for the entry into service. In one hand, you have the lack of demand. I mean, the travel industry is going to be highly impacted, and mostly in wide bodies. I mean, in long distance travel due to restrictions and due to the economy impact that this pandemic has. But also the certification process and the changes that are being pushed, and in most cases are not being successful in that pressure, is going to change the timetable for certification of the 777X.
Yeah, and I think something that you touched on there is kind of the balance between wide bodies and narrow bodies, which of course is something that we notice in Boeing's numbers when they're aiming for 30 737 productions, but for an aircraft that isn't even certified, but they're only looking at 2 or 3 productions a month for other bigger planes like the 777, slightly more, up to 6 for the 787. And it's actually something that we also see in Airbus, who is producing about 40 A320s right now, which is pretty comparable to what in size to what the 737 is, versus only about 2 A330s and 6 A350s. So those are your bigger 787, 777 counterparts. So I think looking at Airbus, looking at what Boeing's doing, we can kind of trace where the demand is, and we can really figure out, I think, like really why Boeing has to make the cuts that it's making in production. And of course, that's something that we're all aware of with the demand drops going on right now. But I think it's kind of interesting to see like the differences between narrow body production versus wide body production.
Yeah, and there is another issue that was really going on before the pandemic, right? That there is the model change. I mean, the industry model change. We are shifting from the hub and spoke model to a point-to-point model. So bigger aircraft is not going to make much more sense unless you are a carrier that relies heavily on that type of operations. I mean, the Gulf operators, the Gulf carriers are going to need this kind of aircraft to connect to Europe and to US, for instance. But for any other operator, a smaller aircraft, easier to fill, with better fuel consumption and with a reduced cost for passenger and mile, is going to make much more sense than a wide body that is aimed to connect big cities. I mean, if you have the technological edge to use an Airbus 321 XLR or LR to connect to two destinations, you're going to use that, and you are not going to be relying on wide bodies to travel that distance, because you can do it now with a much smaller aircraft. So I think that the pandemic has put an abrupt end to that, and it's going to show that in the next years that most probable thing is that the aircraft, the 250 seaters, are going to be much more present in the industry than a 400 seater and a wide body in the whole industry. I mean, unless you have some hub and spoke network that is going to, I think, is going to be much reduced by this technological advance.
And again, I think that is also something that we see, of course, with the changes, as I've said multiple times. So when you're looking at the aircraft that Boeing has that are capable of longer travel, the Dreamliner is known to be a much, relatively at least compared to like the 777, is a much more efficient aircraft. It's a smaller aircraft, so it can better fit those routes, as you mentioned, Pablo, that are kind of like the longer and skinny routes,
Yes.
which might be transatlantic routes with lesser demand, like what we saw to Providence, Rhode Island from Norwegian, for example. So I think looking at the production numbers that we see from Boeing and the cuts, we can really see the shifts in demand both because of the coronavirus and due to just larger economical shifts. And again, like even looking at who the 777 customers are, for example, one of the biggest ones being Emirates, who again, as you mentioned, is pretty like maybe the most drastic or among the most drastic examples of like major hub and spoke operations, with basically kind of two big banks of flights coming in and out of their big Dubai hub. So they're one of the airlines, that needs more of these big 777s, and not necessarily as many Dreamliners, as many A321 XLRs, as some airlines that are kind of moving away from that model.
Yeah, but in a way you are seeing that. I mean, in terms of distance, what is a 777X going to give you that it's not going to give you, a 787-9 is not going to give you? I mean, the margin is getting smaller between those aircraft. So unless you're an operator, a carrier that has 3 classes, right, or 4 classes, like first, premium economy, business, and economy, like Emirates, right? You're going to need aircraft that is more cost effective than to sell an experience like Emirates has. I mean, here, for instance, here in South America, Aerolíneas Argentinas was using the Airbus A330 to go to Dominican Republic, mainly because of capacities. I mean, a technical capacity of distance, right? But when it was able to use the 737 MAX, the change was immediate. I mean, the cost difference was instantly. It was instant. So it is not in any other carrier that is not going to consider luxury as a key feature. You are going to see the change to much smaller aircraft with much more efficiency, even though if this is going to impact a little in the comfort of the flight itself. But once again, if you have an A321 XLR and you can use it into the maximum extension, there is no need for you to use a larger wide body.
Pablo, thank you for joining us this week on the podcast. I've enjoyed our conversation and I've certainly learned a lot. We hope to have you on in the future with more articles.
Okay, thank you guys. Thank you for having me.
Another big story that we had this week came from Southwest Airlines, which is one of the big airlines in the United States. And while it's not one of the three legacy airlines that many know that fly a lot of international routes, it still has a substantial portion of the market share in the United States. And it announced earlier this week that it will not furlough or lay off any of its staff on October 1st. So for people outside the U.S. that may not be as familiar with the bailout that airlines received here, as part of the terms of the bailouts that airlines got in March, they had to keep all of their staff. Well, they couldn't involuntarily lay off any staff through the end of September. So if they had to cut costs, if they had to if they had to reduce their workforce, they were kind of forced to offer packages or a bonus to let people choose to leave. And the first day that they could make involuntary cuts under these bailouts is October 1st. So we've seen a lot of airlines, especially out of the big three, announce that they're going to do that in the United States. So United Airlines has announced up to 36,000 layoffs or furloughs, which could be reduced based on if people take involuntary packages before then. At the start of the month, Delta also sent furlough letters to some of their staff, and American has sent warning letters to about 25,000 staff members. And of course, all of those projections could be lower at the end of the day if a lot of people decide to take voluntary furloughs or unpaid time off or leave the company early. But Southwest has become the biggest airline in the country so far not to commit to any furloughs or for any involuntary layoffs. And that a big part of that is because they've gotten a lot of staff to take voluntary leave or leave the company early. But it's still kind of a big announcement for an airline that just a few weeks earlier was saying that they would need to see demand about triple by the end of the year to not have to lay off any workers or not have to furlough any workers. So it's certainly an interesting thing to see and to hear and to consider. And while Southwest didn't give a specific date of when they will reassess or reevaluate this decision, they did say that they hope to keep staff on through at least the end of the year. So from what we know right now, much of Southwest's staff that hasn't already taken an unpaid time off or an early buyout is expected to have a job at least through the end of 2020, unless some things drastically change before then.
Well, I mean, Southwest Airlines is confirming itself as the voice outside of the choir in the US airline market after maintaining their policy to allow passengers to carry two checked bags for free, or at least included in their fare, unlike what every other carrier is doing in the United States and also in most of Europe and at least half of Asia. They are taking another position to protect their workforce after October 1st, when the world thinks there is going to be an Armageddon of airline layoffs. Now, obviously, we are going to hope that they're not going to lay off people on October 2nd, just to keep their promise and then shed the excess workforce as soon as they can. But I mean, it's unlikely that we're going to see that. Southwest Airlines has always been an airline that has taken care of their people, and they've had a very long history. I mean, at least ever since they started in 1971. They started flying nationally outside of their home state of Texas. And it is reasonable to expect that they're going to do the same thing this time. So I mean, it's going to be probably easier for them because they have a much higher reliance on domestic traffic. Their international network is fairly tiny. They've only been flying to a few destinations outside of the U.S. in Mexico, the Caribbean, and Latin America, and we are talking about a very, very small percentage of the traffic, and it's not going to make a huge difference to their overall picture. So for them, it's going to be easier to recover traffic, given that they're going to be based on domestic demand. Now, they still have to see the domestic demand recover. At the moment, we are targeting, I mean, according to what airlines are saying, we're targeting a 50% recovery. I mean, the airlines don't see traffic going above 50% of what we used to have before the pandemic, without any significant change in the health situation. That means a cure or a remedy or a vaccine, and that is somehow worrisome for all the airlines and also for Southwest.
Yeah, Southwest CEO Gary Kelly has said that things really aren't going to return to normal for airlines until passengers feel comfortable flying again. And just about every analyst, every airline employee will affirm that probably isn't going to come until there is a vaccine. Vaccine research is moving along. In the U.S., there was a company that just a few days ago moved into phase 3 of its trial. So we may very well see a vaccine within maybe like a year, if not sooner. But I mean, even looking at TSA passenger counts for the U.S., we're still at about a quarter in total of passengers screened per month or per day, excuse me, of where we were a year ago. So there's certainly like a long way to go, but I think this is a good sign for Southwest and for the industry. And I think it in many ways for Southwest, it is a really good move to make, because yes, it's going to put some extra financial strain on them. Yes, it's going to be difficult for them to have to continue to pay a good chunk of staff while passenger counts are depressed. But something that United CEO said when Scott Kirby, when he first took over the role, was that having people on staff once a recovery is made is going to be essential to getting back into the sky again, to capturing market share post coronavirus. And I think that Southwest is in a way kind of like making a bet on that, in that once we do start to see a recovery, which again, maybe could come by maybe summer of 2021, at least slowly, is that having that extra staff, having, extra pilots on payroll, extra flight attendants and mechanics and customer service agents, having those people still with the company and not having to, bring them back from furlough if the company can afford to do that, is going to really help them take a big chunk of market share coming out of the coronavirus. And we know that that's something that Southwest really wants to do. So, I mean, in addition to committing to this, they've expressed interest in getting the 737 MAX in service as soon as they can, which can help them boost capacity, which can help them cut fuel costs. So it seems that Southwest really wants to position itself to take off, pardon the pun, after coronavirus starts to pass. So I think the take care of your people is part of it, and of course we know that Southwest has never really been forced to make mass layoffs or mass furloughs in its history. But I also think that positioning themselves is key here to kind of snatch some of the extra market share from the big three airlines, from United, from American, from Delta. And I think having staff ready to go as soon as possible and kind of at a moment's notice is going to be really helpful for them if they can continue to keep people with them as long as they can without furloughs. Southwest isn't the only airline in the U.S. to make an announcement like this. A few weeks ago, JetBlue also announced that it would not furlough any of its pilots until May 1st of 2021. So JetBlue is the only airline that's given kind of a firm extension date of, like, instead of on October 1st, like, here is a second day where you can expect to have your jobs through. And of course that only applies to pilots, so not other staff. But I think I honestly wouldn't be surprised if other unions at JetBlue can kind of use that agreement to their advantage. And I do think that will help JetBlue, like Southwest, take a little extra market share as we're coming out of the coronavirus. I think, but before we move on to our last story, I think it's also worth to mention Southwest's financial situation right now. So last Thursday, so a week and a day before we published this, Southwest announced their quarterly earnings for the second quarter of 2020, and they lost just under $1 billion in the second quarter. They've lost about $1.5 billion throughout the whole of 2020 so far. Again, of a majority of which came when the coronavirus was really in full force and we were kind of at our lowest to low for travel. But the airline also has about $14 billion extra in reserve in cash. In addition to its CARES funding, it was able to raise some money from shareholders. It sold some extra stock. So the company has said that they think that at their current rate, they can afford to pay for about 2 years of its current losses, which are about $18 million a day. The one caveat to that is that they have $11 billion in debt that they are also paying right now that's unrelated to the coronavirus, which is going to add a bit of an extra burden to them. And they estimate that they could lose about $1 billion every 2 months with coronavirus losses and their debt payments combined. So that's going to give them a lot less time to kind of figure things out and to, figure out how they're going to, pay staff as long as possible to keep them on. But I think, compared to some other airlines that we've seen, they didn't lose as much as they could have during the second quarter, which is a good sign for them. So I think it's going to be interesting to kind of see how they continue to manage their losses, and to manage how they're paying people. And of course, in the U.S., there is I believe a 60-day notice from before you're furloughed that your employer will need to warn you, which is why we're getting a lot of notices now from airlines, since we're about a few months out from October 1st when furloughs will need to be made. So we'll certainly know about any layoffs that Southwest will need to make a while before they end up making them. And I think if they're going to lay off anyone this year, we should hear about that in the coming weeks, maybe in a couple months. But I think it'll kind of be interesting to see how Southwest manages the third quarter, kind of knowing what we know now with how to manage capacity and how to manage routes and networks and flights and all that. So of course it's going to be interesting to watch what they do, since they are kind of uncertain right now in just how long they're protecting employees for. But I think it's an interesting story to keep an eye on, to kind of see where Southwest goes, and to see how they continue to protect their employees, as they are really known to do in the U.S. aviation industry. Our third story today is out of China. So China, a number of Chinese airlines, I believe there are 8 or 9 in total that have done something along these lines. But we have heard recently, especially with China Southern, which at the time of recording has done this most recently, a lot of airlines in China have offered passengers like an all-you-can-fly pass. So these are passes that over the next few months will let passengers really take whatever flight they want whenever they feel like it, basically for free, besides a tax that really doesn't exceed $10.
Yeah, I mean, the concept of an air pass is not new in the airline industry. I mean, it's been in the market for a number of years. Many airlines have done it in different formats. But it seems that during this pandemic period, this is the new flavor of the month, because as you said, at least 8 airlines in China have offered some kind of all-you-can-fly pass. The latest one is China Southern, that has launched its Fly Happily Pass, that for an amount of approximately $500, just over $500, which is about 3,700 yuan, the Chinese currency, allows to fly anywhere in domestic China between July 28th, I believe, and January 6th. So for a period of close to 5 months, then it's possible to crisscross the country, paying only taxes, which they don't amount to more than, as you said, about $10 US a flight. Now there are no information on whether this pass has capacity restrictions, whether there are some caveats around it. But it's reasonable to assume that every seat will be available for grab to this pass, which represents incredible value, because it will allow any traveler to go anywhere in the China Southern network for just over $500. Now, they are not the only ones to have launched a program like this. There has been China Eastern had launched earlier this month a new version of their Fly As You Wish. It was slightly cheaper. It was about 3,300 yuan, so approximately $50 cheaper, and it had the restriction that it could not be used during weekdays. It was only available during weekends. Now, this helped push the network-wide load factors of China Eastern to up to 75% during those weekends. And the airline is reporting that they've sold over 100,000 of these passes. There's also another offer from Hainan Airlines, the airline that is based in Hainan Island, an island that is in the South China Sea. It's approximately southwest. It's southwest of Hong Kong, and it allows to travel anywhere to and from the Hainan region for approximately 2,700 yuan, which is roughly 380 US dollars. Now, you can't help but wonder, is this a model that could be replicated outside of China? We know that other airlines in other parts of the world have proposed something similar, and actually quite recently, AirAsia, the ultra-low-cost airline based in Malaysia and with a massive presence throughout Southeast Asia, they decided to offer an unlimited pass that for slightly over $100, about $120, it was allowing passenger to fly standby to get a seat for free on a flight that had available seats. Now, this is actually quite easy to find flights with available seats in this environment, and this kind of pass is sort of reproducing the benefits that airline employees have included in the employment package, because airline employees tend to have the possibility of flying on standby, paying just a small fee for processing the ticket. Now, this is a model that has not had much success in the United States. Many of us who are not very young, let's say it this way, may probably remember that American Airlines launched a product in the early 80s called AA Air Pass that for $250,000 allowed any passenger purchasing the pass to take any flight in the American airline network in any class for a life. So essentially, this was a lifetime fly as you wish pass in up to first class. It was possible to buy it for one person for $250,000, and it was also possible to add a companion seat for another $150,000. Now, there is literature in the airline publications about people who actually used these passes to their extreme. They managed to fly to England for a dinner. They went to see a concert in Australia. They did all sorts of crazy things, but they also did some things that were not allowed in the original contract. So their membership ended up being terminated. However, some of these memberships are still available, and they are still active. The program was terminated in 1994. When the price for the lifetime pass was over $2 million. But at the moment, it's not possible to purchase it any longer. The only other example in the US market that we can remember is JetBlue. JetBlue ended up offering an all-you-can-fly, all-you-can-jet, I believe that was the name, pass for a month, starting from the Tuesday after Labor Day to exactly 1 month after. So from the 8th of September to the 8th of October, if I remember correctly, both in 2009 and in 2010, that was allowing passengers to take any flight they wanted in the network of JetBlue. At that time, JetBlue did not have international flights, so it was only in the United States, and this allowed them to fly as much as they wish for approximately $600. That was the first attempt to the fly as you what was the name? Jet as you want of JetBlue. On the following year, they proposed two products, one that allowed access to every seat and another that was capacity restricted and could not be used during the weekends. And they was slightly the first one was slightly more expensive. The second was slightly cheaper, and that was the last example of an all-you-can-fly pass in the United States. In other parts of the world, the season passes are actually quite normal. For example, Air Canada offers a wide range of unlimited monthly passes on some of their routes, especially on domestic routes and on the flights down to Florida, where a lot of Canadians have second homes. And also in the late 80s, beginning of the 90s, there were a couple of German carriers offering season passes between Germany and the island of Mallorca, Spain, where a lot of Germans had second homes. So it was easier for them to just purchase a pass and then treat it like a bus pass, and they could go back and forth as many times as they wanted. Now, difficult to say whether this is going to see some more repetitions outside of China. Probably not in the United States. I don't know if the public is in the right mood for this kind of product. Maybe in Europe it would be slightly different. In Europe it could be a different kind of value proposition, because it's a market where there's always been a travel as you wish pass with trains. There is a very famous train pass called Interrail that many young people have used to travel around Europe, and that has also been quite popular with people from the United States. But fares in Europe are quite low as they are, so those passes, they tend not to represent a very good value proposition for passengers. So we're just going to have to wait and see, and maybe cross our fingers in case there is some good offer that allows us to fly throughout the country during this very strange period.
I think people will also be looking at really how airlines kind of recover using this in China, and really how these passes can impact the spread of the coronavirus. China was one of the first one of the first countries that started opening up around the world. It's of course where the coronavirus was first identified. It's where it was the first epicenter of the virus. But it also managed to get the virus under control before a lot of other countries did, or at least other countries that are as big as China is and it had as many infections. So I think people will be watching. I think airlines will be watching, and analysts will be watching to see how these passes affect travel, how these passes affect health, and how passengers react to them. Of course, Fanny, as you mentioned, 100,000 people have already purchased passes from China Eastern. So people, I think, really do want to travel and to be out and around. So I think it's just going to take some time to see how everything kind of unfolds, and I think it's watching this could be a great way to kind of get some preliminary pictures or information data about how reopening could happen across the world as we move toward vaccine or treatment for the coronavirus.
The fact that China Eastern has offered an all-you-can-fly pass just for weekends kind of suggests that the demand, the pickup in demand is probably driven by some important business component, because that obviously is the indication that we get from these figures. I mean, some of the newspapers that are reporting this fact have collected some testimony from passengers, and most of them are young professionals whose incomes are actually very close to the ones in the West, while the average salary in China is still a lot lower than what happens in Europe or in North America. And then those people, they have managed to purchase the pass so they can visit different areas of the country. And this kind of shows that the orientation of the pass is mainly to leisure passengers. Although I do believe that the China Southern offer may also be used by some business passengers, especially independent business passengers that need to watch their pennies, and they need to make sure that their travel expenses are done in an efficient way. And I do believe that that would probably get them to switch to China Southern wherever that is possible, because the control of the government on airlines is actually quite tight in that country.
As always, we'd like to thank you for listening to the AG Lounge by Airline Geeks podcast. As always, you can read more about all of these topics on our website at AirlineGeeks.com or by visiting our social media platforms at Airline Geeks on both Instagram and on Twitter. Thank you for joining us this week. We look forward to spending some time with you again next week. And we look forward to seeing how all these stories develop.